My mother-in-law, Barbara, heaved my vintage leather suitcase onto the wet asphalt of the driveway with a grunt of satisfaction. It landed with a sickening thud, splashing muddy water onto my shins. "And don't you dare come back until you learn your place," she screamed, her voice cracking against the sound of the rain. "This is my son's house. You are a guest here, and a poor one at that. If you can't show respect to the people who raised the man who puts a roof over your head, you can sleep on the street." My father-in-law, Frank, stood in the doorway, arms crossed over his chest, looking like a bouncer at a club I wasn't cool enough to enter. He didn't say a word. He just smirked, shook his head as if I were a disappointing child, and slammed the heavy oak front door in my face. I stood there for a moment, the cold rain soaking through my sweater, staring at the house I had spent 6 months renovating. I looked at the custom brass knocker I had picked out in Charleston. I looked at the landscaping I had paid $15,000 to install last spring. They thought they were kicking a squatter out of their son's mansion. They had no idea they had just evicted the landlord. I didn't cry. I didn't pound on the door. I simply picked up my wet suitcase, walked to my car, and drove away. As I pulled out of the driveway, I checked the time. It was 8:43 p.m. on a Thursday. By 9:00 a.m. Friday, they would be begging me to unlock that door, but by then it would be far too late. My name is Julian Hartford, Jules to my friends, and I'm 29 years old. For the last 3 years, I've been living a lie, but not a malicious one. I've been living a lie designed to protect the fragile ego of my husband, Mark. When I met Mark, I was already quietly wealthy. My father was a patent attorney who invested early and aggressively in biotech. When he passed away 4 years ago, he left me a trust fund worth just over $3 million. Mark, on the other hand, is a regional sales manager for a solar panel company. He does well. He makes about $90,000 a year, but he is obsessed with being the provider. He has this old-school, toxic idea that if he isn't the financial head of the household, he's not a man. So, when we got married and decided to buy our dream home in Austin, I made a choice I now regret. I bought the house. I paid $850,000 in cash from my trust. But to keep Mark from feeling emasculated, I let him tell everyone, especially his parents, that he bought it. I set up a complex legal structure where the house was owned by the Hartford Family Trust, which lists me as the sole beneficiary and trustee, but on the surface, we just called it our house. Mark knew the truth, of course, but he loved the lie. He loved puffing out his chest at family barbecues when his dad patted him on the back and said, "You did good, son. A house like this before 30? You're a king." The trouble started 3 weeks ago when Barbara and Frank flooded their basement. I use air quotes because the contractor I hired to fix it told me privately that it looked like someone had deliberately left a tap running, but I couldn't prove it. They needed a place to stay for a few days while repairs were made. Mark, ever the dutiful son, invited them in without asking me. "It's a big house, Jules," he said. "We won't even notice them." We noticed them. Or rather, I noticed them. Mark was conveniently absent. 2 days after they moved in, Mark left for a 2-week business trip to Tokyo. He kissed me goodbye, glanced nervously at his mother unpacking her porcelain doll collection in my guest room, and whispered, "Just keep the peace, okay? They're old." Then he fled, leaving me alone with 2 people who believed I was a gold digger living off their son's hard work. The dynamic shifted the second Mark's Uber left for the airport. Barbara stopped asking. She started commanding. On Tuesday, she rearranged my kitchen because my organization system didn't make sense. On Wednesday, Frank told me I was wasting electricity by keeping the AC at 72 degrees and turned it up to 78 while I was working in my home office. When I confronted him, he laughed. "When you pay the bills, little lady, you can touch the thermostat. Until then, respect Mark's money." I almost snapped then. I almost pulled up the bank transfer showing I paid the utility bills, the property tax, and the insurance. But I promised Mark. I kept the peace. I bit my tongue until it bled. I cooked, I cleaned, I nodded politely while Barbara criticized my career as a freelance copywriter, calling it a cute little hobby. "It's nice that Mark lets you play pretend writer," she said over breakfast one morning, buttering toast with aggressive force. "Most men wouldn't be so tolerant of a wife who doesn't contribute. You should be grateful he keeps you around." "I contribute, Barbara," I said, gripping my coffee mug. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Buying groceries with his credit card isn't contributing. It's spending." The explosion happened on Thursday night. I had spent 6 hours on a deadline for a major tech client. I was exhausted. I came downstairs at 7:00 p.m. to find the kitchen destroyed. Flour on the floor, grease on the stove, every pot and pan I owned piled in the sink. Barbara was sitting at the island, drinking my expensive wine. "Dinner isn't ready," she announced. "Frank and I are hungry. We expected you to have something on the table by 6. "I was working," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And why is the kitchen a wreck?" "I decided to bake a cake," she said. "But I got tired. You can clean it up while you make dinner. Frank wants steak." "I'm not making steak," I said. "And I'm not cleaning up your mess, Barbara. I am not the maid." That was the trigger. Barbara stood up, her face flushing red. "Excuse me, you are living in my son's luxury home, eating his food, spending his money, and you refuse to cook a meal for his parents? You ungrateful little parasite." "This isn't Mark's house," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "And I am not a parasite." "Don't you lie to me," she screamed. She grabbed my arm. "Mark told us everything. He told us how he rescued you. He told us he pays for everything. He's a saint and you are a leech." She dragged me toward the front door. It was absurd. I'm 5'7" and do yoga. She's 5'2" and subsists on hatred and casseroles. I could have pushed her off, but I was in shock. Frank appeared from the living room, sensing a fight. "What's going on?" he barked. "She's disrespecting us, Frank. She refused to cook. She called us messy. In Mark's house?" Frank's face darkened. He grabbed my other arm. "Get out," he said. "What?" "You heard her. Get out. We're not going to sit here and let you insult us in our son's home. You can cool off outside. Maybe a night in a cheap motel will teach you some gratitude." They physically shoved me out the door. I stumbled onto the porch. Before I could turn around, Barbara threw my suitcase, which had been sitting in the hallway because I was planning a weekend trip to visit my sister, out after me. Then came the slam, then the click of the deadbolt. I stood in the rain, processing what had just happened. They had kicked me out of my own house, the house my father's money bought, the house my name was on the deed for. The audacity was so colossal, it was almost impressive. I walked to my car, a sensible SUV that I also paid for, and sat in the driver's seat. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath. I could call the police right now. I could show them the deed on my phone. They would force Barbara and Frank to open the door. But that was too messy. And honestly, it wasn't enough. They wanted to teach me a lesson about ownership. Fine, I would give them a masterclass. I drove 20 minutes to the Four Seasons downtown. I valeted the car, walked to the front desk, and booked the executive suite for the weekend. I pulled out my emergency credit card, the black one that Mark didn't know about, and slapped it on the counter. Once I was in the room, wrapped in a plush robe with a glass of champagne, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. It was late, but he answered. "Jules," he asked. "Everything okay?" "No, James," I said. "It's time to trigger Clause 4 of the trust agreement." "The immediate vacancy clause," James sighed. "You mean the one regarding unauthorized occupants? Are you sure? That's the nuclear option, Jules. It initiates an automatic eviction notice and—" "Do it," I interrupted. "File it tonight electronically. I want the sheriff serving papers by lunch tomorrow." "Understood," James said. "I'll have the courier there in the morning." The second thing I did was open the Smart Home app on my phone. See, when I renovated the house, I went full tech. Everything was connected. The lights, the thermostat, the electronic locks, the security system, even the main water valve. It was all controlled by my admin account. I saw the status of the house. Living room, 72 degrees. Lights on, TV on, they were comfortable. They were probably eating the steak they found in the freezer, laughing about how they showed me who was boss. I took a sip of champagne and tapped the screen. First, I changed the admin password, locking out Mark's secondary account. Then I went to the thermostat. Current setting, 72. I spun the dial down. New setting, 50 degrees. It was November. It would get cold fast. Next, I went to the lighting zones. Master bedroom, off. Kitchen, off. Living room, off. I tapped the vacation mode on the smart water valve. Water supply, cut. Finally, I engaged the perimeter security mode. This setting was designed for when the house was empty. If any interior motion was detected, the alarm wouldn't just beep. It would blare a 120 decibel siren and strobe the exterior floodlights until the code was entered. I changed the code. I watched on the app as the status changed. System armed, I waited. 30 seconds later, my phone pinged with a notification. Motion detected. Living room. Then, alarm triggered. I opened the live camera feed from the living room. It was chaos. The lights were out, plunging the house into darkness. The emergency strobes were flashing outside, casting manic shadows through the windows. The siren was deafening. I could hear it even through the tiny phone speaker. Barbara was screaming, hands over her ears. Frank was running around trying to punch the keypad on the wall, but the code 1234 wasn't working anymore. I watched them scramble for 5 minutes. Then, I turned off the siren, just the noise, but kept the lights off and the temperature dropping. I wanted them to sleep in the cold. I wanted them to understand what it feels like to be unwelcome in a place you thought was yours. I slept like a baby on the hotel's 800 thread count sheets. I woke up at 7:00 a.m. to 42 missed calls, 30 from Mark, 12 from Barbara. Mark's voicemails started confused and ended in panic. Jules, Mom says the power is out and the alarm went crazy. Pick up. Jules, why aren't you answering? Mom says you left. Where are you? Jules, Dad says the water isn't working. They can't flush the toilets. What is going on? I poured myself a coffee and dialed Mark. He answered on the first ring. Jules, thank God, what is happening? Mom and Dad are freezing. They said the house is broken. The house isn't broken, Mark, I said calmly. I turned it off. You, what? I turned it off. From my phone, just like I turned off the lie I've been telling for 3 years. What are you talking about? Mark sounded breathless. Your parents kicked me out last night, Mark. They threw my suitcase in the rain. They told me to leave your house. They told me to learn respect for the man who pays the bills. Oh God, Mark groaned. Jules, they're old school. I'm sure they didn't mean. They changed the locks, Mark. They literally locked me out of the house I bought. The house my trust fund paid for. The house you told them you bought. Silence. I'm done, Mark. I'm done protecting your ego. I'm at the Four Seasons. My lawyer is on his way to the house right now with the deed and an eviction notice. He's also bringing the police to escort trespassers off the property. Trespassers? Mark screamed. They're my parents. They are unauthorized occupants in a home owned by the Hartford Family Trust, and since I am the sole trustee and I have revoked their permission to be there, they are trespassing. Jules, please, don't do this. Think about the family. Just unlock the house. I'll talk to them. I'll fix it. You had 3 years to fix it, I said. You chose the lie, now you can live with the truth. I hung up. I pulled up the camera feed again. A sheriff's cruiser was pulling into the driveway, lights flashing. A sleek black sedan pulled in behind it, my lawyer James. I watched James step out, holding a thick file. He walked up to the door where Frank was shivering in his bathrobe, looking confusingly at the sheriff. James handed him the papers. I couldn't hear the audio, but I saw Frank's body language shift from aggressive to small. He looked at the papers. He pointed at the house. James shook his head and pointed at the driveway. Barbara came out, wrapped in a blanket. She started yelling at the sheriff. That was a mistake. The sheriff stepped forward, hand on his belt. He wasn't having it. He gestured for them to move. They were being evicted, in their bathrobes, in front of the neighbors. Mark called again. I let it go to voicemail. I never moved back into that house. I couldn't. The memory of them treating me like a servant in my own sanctuary was too strong. I sold it 3 months later for a $200,000 profit. The divorce was finalized last week. Mark tried to fight for half the house, but the trust was ironclad. He got nothing. He's currently living in an apartment complex near the highway. I heard from a mutual friend that he finally told his parents the truth, mostly because he had to explain why he couldn't buy them a retirement condo like he had promised. Barbara and Frank sent me a letter a few weeks ago. It wasn't an apology. It was a request for me to return the sentimental items they claimed they left in the guest room, specifically the porcelain dolls. I replied with a single photo of the donation receipt to the local Goodwill. I'm Jules Hartford. I'm single, I'm wealthy, and I just bought a penthouse downtown. It has a biometric lock that only opens for my fingerprint. And I'll tell you this, I will never, ever let a man take credit for my hard work again. If you enjoyed this story of reclaiming my castle, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have turned the heat back on, or would you have let them freeze? I think we all know my answer.